Well, this is an exciting day for me, as I said, and one of the best things about it is I get to introduce you to one of my beloved friends and colleagues. So I met her originally in 2015 at the Las Vegas convention, CSL convention here. And then I guess it was 2016, I'm sitting in class in San Diego, and she walks in and sits down next to me. And so we finished ministerial school together, and then we were colleagues together at CSL home office in Denver, and she has been many things to me. She's been a mentor, especially a business coach, practitioner, colleague, fellow student, but most of all, I call her my beloved friend. And so it's my pleasure to welcome Reverend Sonia Byrne.
And it's my absolute pleasure to be here. As I would say an extreme extrovert, there were a couple of years, a little while ago, that were really difficult for me. And I know that they were difficult for everyone. And I especially know this because even my introverted friends started reaching out. So you know it's bad if your introverted friends are reaching out. And isn't life interesting like that? The things that we push against, or the things that we don't see as like us, are often the things that show up. And because the universe is a bit of a bugger, right, and it has a sixth sense of humor, it gives you the things that you need to work on. And sometimes they're not the things that we like. Sometimes they're not the things that we want. And sometimes we even spend a lifetime working on a lesson because we are refusing to yield or surrender or move into it. So I have specifically been asked to speak to you about peace today because it has been a problem for me. I have been asked to speak about peace because it riles me up like not a lot of other topics. I have some views, I have some judgments, even my hands are starting to get stiff, as I think about this idea of peace. So when I came in to sit down in that master's program school in San Diego where Reverend Laura and her colleagues were, I had flown in from Cairo to attend these classes because I was living in the Middle East. As a matter of fact, my dance with peace is so deep that the universe decided to send me to the Middle East during a war for 5 years so I could learn a little about peace and what that all looks like. I believe Reverend Laura said last week, she may have mentioned that I live in Mexico right now. I'm Canadian, but I've lived in a number of countries and I've worked in a number of countries, and right now I'm choosing to be in Mexico. And because the universe gives us what we need, I actually ended up there when I was in a time of transition, and a friend of mine who, interestingly enough, is known as the peace troubadour on this planet, a man named James, said, come on down and spend a little time in my spiritual community and take your time and decide what's next. And I accepted that invitation. And he is an interesting dude. When I met him, he was doing a talk, and he said, so I became the peace troubadour quite by accident. I became known for it. And clearly I needed to work on peace in my heart. But I knew how deep my issue was with peace when Saddam Hussein called me to create a peace concert with Sting, and I had to travel to the other side of the planet to do this. So he also has this dance with peace. And a few months ago, he approached me and said, I would like you to use your business skills and your background, and I'd like you to go in collaboration with me and restart a seminary that I had for 16 years, and I had over 600 ministers around the world trained in this seminary called the Beloved Community Seminary. And I was very interested in it because I love this kind of stuff, and I love solving a problem and starting up new initiatives. I have a lot of energy for that. And he said, yes, it's a beloved community seminary of ministers of peacemaking. And I thought, oh, you universe, you what are you doing to me? And when we think that things are different from us, we also have a little bit of fear. And fear shows up in some of that judgment and some of that rub that we have around certain topics in our life. And so for me, you're going to go to your, much like Reverend Laura's puppy, you're going to go to your forever home soon, right? Like we've been in this community waiting to go to our forever home, and so now it is within our grasp, and you're about to go through construction. In Mexico, I have been building a mindful leadership retreat. It's a pretty significant project for me, and although I'm not a specialist in construction, I have an interest in making something really usable, and so a space really usable. So I've ended up doing construction projects or overseeing projects around the world that have construction involved with them, in the United States, in Canada, in the Middle East, and now in this retreat center in Mexico. And on Monday, it will mark 13 months of construction. It was a very significant remodel. 13 months is fine. There's no problem with the 13 months. What I found was interesting was the way that construction happens is very different. So I have a crew of sometimes 14, 16 guys that show up in the morning, and the first thing they do is have breakfast, which is not at all what happens in like Chicago or Toronto when a construction crew arrives. But I decided, I would join in on this, and I bring cola and sometimes coffee and donuts or cookies. And so 13 months times 6 days a week of working, I'm quite invested in this project with Coca-Cola and donuts and that sort of thing. And I never really know what's going to happen. So I was a few months into the project, and the big papa, the grand poobah of this construction crew, his name is Juan, and he is a force. He's a physical force. He's the biggest, tallest guy. Like if Juan is running out of a building, you want to go right behind him because he knows something and he will keep you safe. And so he comes to me and he says, Senora Sonia, tomorrow we have a party. And I thought, okay, we're going to have a party now on the construction site. Okay. It'll be a barbecue. We're making carne asada. This is good. We want to celebrate that we have been working here for 90 days, 3 months, and we want to thank you for all of the goodies you give us every morning. And I thought, oh, how nice. This is wonderful. Also not your typical construction story from Chicago or Toronto. And so I come to my house the next day and open it for the construction crew, and I said, I'll go get the barbecue. And Juan says, no, it's okay, we're good. So I think, I don't see a barbecue, and I've got this very nice, fancy barbecue that's portable. We could use that. No, we don't need it. I said, well, then how about I get tequila? Oh, yes, we need that. So about the time that they're going to start getting ready, they tell me, okay, it's a good time to go get tequila. So I leave to go get tequila, and the tequila was easy to find, but then I needed like little shot glass cups, so I had to go to a few stores. All told, I'm out of my own property for about 1 hour. And when I come back, it's a very different property. So I drive up, and my door is slightly ajar at the street, and I can hear music. And as I'm approaching the door, I realize I recognize the music. I recognize the music of the music, but not the words of the music, because they're in Spanish. Okay. But I open the door to my property I'm walking into the middle of a party. That's been happening, clearly, for about an hour. And I recognize as I go up the steps that the music is The Night Chicago Died, but in Spanish. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da. Oh, I'm doing this in Vegas. Look at that. It's the perfect place to do it. So, yeah, they're playing The Night Chicago Died. It's all this music, and I see Juan, and he's under a tree, and he's sort of sweating a bit, and he's turned the wheelbarrow into a barbecue, and the carne asada and the green onions are on there, and a man has the trowel, and he's, fanning the flames with the trowel, and I look to my right, and around the skirt of the swimming pool, there's a group of men in an assembly line that's worthy of Lucy and Ethel in the chocolate factory. One guy has the roasted peppers, and he's got a mortar and pestle. I don't own a mortar and pestle. And he is making chili. And then a couple of guys next to him have their X-Acto knives out, and they're cutting the avocados from my tree. And they're making guacamole. And I think, what the heck am I going to do? So I do the only thing I could do. I join in. So I tuck the tequila under my arm, get the little cups, and I start to walk around. this was so not my norm. It was so not familiar to me. It was not anything that I had experienced before. And so I was a little uncomfortable till I yielded, till I joined in. Peace is a little like that for me. So I grew up in a situation where there wasn't a lot of peace, so I grew some skills to navigate conflict and to navigate difficult conversations, so I don't tend to shy away from them. But peace was a very internal experience for me, and I had to find my own inner peace in the midst of some chaos. Not surprising then that I end up in the Middle East, that I have a consulting business where I deal with organizations that are generally going through problems and they want peace and they don't have it. And it's always fascinating when a future client calls me because they're only calling me because the wheels have fallen off the bus, I'm the last resort, someone's told them to call me. So I get a phone call, and as we're stepping into the call, I'm thinking, I wonder what's happening with you folks that you're speaking to me today, because they have lost their path to peace. You know, maybe if they had Juan and his carne asada people, they might feel a little bit more joy, and joy is a great stepping stone to peace, isn't it? So I have, in terms of the concept of peace, you know, our brains work interestingly, and we can come up with the things that we're not, or that we don't want first. And so I have 3 things that peace is not, but I have 3 things that peace really is. And so in my experience, peace is not about comfort. And maybe we think that peace is supposed to be really comfortable, and it is a comfortable place to be, but it is not a permanent place to be. It's something we work on. It's kind of like lids on pots on a stove. The minute that we turn away, something changes and we got to reset the pot. So it's a bit of whack-a-mole. It's a constant experience of trying to do something that brings us back to homeostasis. We, as human beings, are a little bit lazy. We kind of like our comforts. And so you know that during the pandemic, it wasn't like a global peace initiative or mass communication failure that took us down. It was toilet paper. Like, this is how cute we are as human beings, that toilet paper took us down, right? Oh, what was the biggest issue? Can't get toilet paper. Oh my gosh. And so we really want to get back to comfort. And so innovation happens not always to create the best and the most interesting way of handling something, but to get us back to comfort. Like, I can't get my groceries. How do I get my toilet paper? Please, somebody help me. And all kinds of things get created to bring us back to that soft place. In 1979, in the city of Mississauga, just outside of Toronto, it's actually where the Toronto airport is, there was the most significant train derailment causing the largest mass evacuation of people, over 200,000 in that area, until Hurricane Katrina. So before Hurricane Katrina, this was the biggest mass evacuation. This train derailment was significant, and it was clear that there was products on it that were flammable. There was a lot of fire, and the local authorities were very concerned. They could not figure out what was on there because the placards that we see today had not really been created. And all of the transportation of dangerous goods and hazardous materials laws weren't as significant and robust as they are now. And in Canada, it took that train derailment to make that happen. We don't always sit around thinking, how can we solve a problem? Usually a problem happens, and then we think, how can we solve a problem, right? So something that is considered quite negative actually turned into something positive. But us lazy, comfortable humans have a whole history of our humanity, of exactly things like that. And peace is a little like that. It's also not inactive. It's not a static state. It's actually highly participative. And people have to work at it. So I always get suspicious of people who are saying, oh, I just want some peace, or don't interrupt my peace, or I can't be in this conversation because of peace. Because of the way that I think about things, what goes through my mind is, okay, you've not developed the skills to have some difficult conversations, so peace is like your go-to place. But that's not anybody else's problem that you haven't developed the skills and the ability to have a difficult conversations. We are adults. And so, the third thing is spiritual bypass. Peace is not spiritual bypass. So when people are saying, it's all good, it's all God, and it's really a way of like checking out of life and avoiding life, then, there's a inauthenticity in this. There's a lack of genuineness in that. And I can get that people may want to check out for a moment or decide that they have had enough of this real world, sometimes without its toilet paper. It's difficult. Life is not always a party like Juan and his group making carne asada for us with tequila. It's not always like that. However, this idea that peace is something that we achieve and stay in, the people who are checking out and doing spiritual bypass to have peace are actually in a lot of turmoil. And there's a lot of inner chaos going on often to keep that outside viewpoint of peace. And sometimes what ends up happening for them is they get exhausted from all of the work that it is, all of the relationships you can't have, all the places you can't go, all the conversations you can't be part of, because you need to keep your peace. And so the pathway through peace is through some difficult stuff. I've learned by living in some places where there is turmoil that war is simply communication. It may not be great communication. Somebody is clearly saying that they feel that things aren't equal, and they're making some really demonstrative attempt to equalize things and to make life better. But the absence of any sort of difficult conversation in the world is not what we're looking for when we're looking for peace. Peace must be a dynamic situation. So peace is always dynamic. And as a matter of fact, we can't have peace without diversity. In order to have peace in our hearts, we have to be able to appreciate that other people are different, that other ways of living are different. And in a very Western concept, we've sometimes made attempts to wrap the world in our version of peace. We've even been very aggressive and created wars, which seem like the opposite of peace, to get to peace, right? And in a country like the United States that has the auspicious ability to say that they're the #1 country in the world for mass shootings, and that the highest population of incarcerated individuals are in the United States, most of them people of color. It's like, well, maybe we have, if we're doing inner work as humans, maybe we got some inner work to do on this side of the world before we think that this great thing we've all created, that the rest of the world should be part of it. Having lived and worked in the Middle East for 5 years, from 2011 to 2016, during the revolution in Cairo and Tahrir Square and all that stuff, I definitely got to see that the same viewpoint exists in the other side of the world. So we're standing here in the West, possibly even unconsciously, subconsciously thinking, we've got this great idea and everyone should live like us. And I gotta tell you that the people over on the other side of the world are thinking, we've got this great idea and they should live like us. And so as long as we are in this polarity, how can there be peace at a greater space? And we've got so much to work on in North America that equality is such a topic. It's been a topic for my whole life, and it's still probably a couple of generations away. But what I can predict for us is that when we get to some place that we call equality, we're going to be able to, like the little prairie dogs, tuck our head up and look at the rest of the world, and we are going to find that they live differently, and maybe we don't like it. And so then what do we do with that? How do we rationalize that in China you can have one child, and that in some places in the Middle East you can have 4 wives? How do we find ourselves being okay with all of that? Where is the space to be okay with all that? Well, the good news is we're probably not going to have to deal with that in our lifetime, because we're really moving quite slow with this whole equality thing. But the peace can only come from accepting diverse ways of thinking and diverse ways of living. And so right now, we can work on peace inside ourselves, but peace is also about acceptance. And we don't think about that because the stuff in front of us is so big that we're not really thinking about how we're going to feel when we have to accept other ideas. Unless we are going to wrap the planet in our idea, which, as I can see right now, it's like, yeah, it's not maybe an idea that the rest of the planet wants to be part of. I recall being in Cairo during a time of a media event where there was a gentleman from Canada who was originally born in Egypt who became a Canadian citizen and went back to Egypt during this civil war. And he got involved in something and created a problem, and he ended up being incarcerated. And he sought help from the Canadian embassy and from the Canadian government. So I got one news story in Egypt and another when I came back to Toronto. And I remember sitting on the back porch of my friend's house with a third friend, and we were having a glass of wine. It's a beautiful summer night. And the third friend says to me, and we're all part of CSL, and we're all kind of like thinking this way, you know. And she says, "Oh my gosh, that's so wrong." And I said, "What is so wrong about it?" And she said, "Well, you know, he's incarcerated and we need to help him." And I said, "Well, you know, he did some stuff." "Well, yes, but it's not right." And so I said, "How do you know it's not right?" And she struggled for a moment. I said, "Right and wrong is not universal. So how do you know it's not right? What is the mechanism you're using to determine that it is not right?" She said, "Well, it's just very wrong." I'm like, okay, we're not getting anywhere in this conversation. We're first glass of wine too, right? So we should be better than this. And so I said, "What is it that makes it not right? What is it that makes it wrong?" And she said, "Well, the law." And I said, "Well, the law is different there." And he broke the law there. He would not have broken the law in Canada. We have different laws. "Well, you know, it's just morally wrong." And I said, "Well, what are you using for the moral compass?" And she had to think, wait a second. Because we think everybody's like us, right? And she said, and I know where she's going to go, and she's going to go to a book of some sort. And she's like, "Well, you know, the Bible says." I said, "Well, they have a different book over there, and it doesn't say this." "Oh, okay." So we're in this conversation, and I had just come from going to Toronto. I had just come from a gathering in Cairo. The project that I was on was part of some things to do with the Canadian embassy and the Canadian government there. So I had been at an embassy party, a spaghetti contest, actually, spaghetti sauce contest at the Trade Commissioner's house. Oh, I won, by the way, but that's just the extrovert in me. I have to tell you that, right? Yeah, side. And so I had met up with the ambassador, and I said, "How are things going?" And he said, "Oh, you know, this storyline is really taking it out of me because, you know, I can't win in this. Like, I'm the bad guy no matter what." But if he had accepted that somebody would come from another country, become a Canadian, and then go back to their country and do something that they know was illegal, and we accepted all of that, we would be setting a very dangerous precedent in the world. So he had to make a very unpopular decision, which the whole of Canada and the people who think like the third person on the patio that night were really, really upset with. But in order to keep peace, he had to make a difficult decision. So when being able to accept that morals are not geographically, around the world the same, that morals actually have a different space in different places. And if we're using that moral compass, we don't all have the same software installed around the moral compass for us. So this is a challenge for peace too, right? When we think about it, all of a sudden peace has gotten a little more complex. Yeah. And lastly, what peace is internal. So I've invited us to consider that we can have peace inside a space, inside a country, and that we need to do that internal work inside ourselves, as a person in that country, as a person in our community, and it always starts with us. You know, we say peace is an inside job. It's absolutely an inside job. Knowing everything that I've just explained to you, where is the space for peace? We don't have to be worried about who's going to provide us toilet paper. It's going to get worked out, right? We don't have to worry about the work that ambassador had to do that day. We don't have to worry about all of these things at the country level, at the global level. But we can choose what we participate in, and we can make peace an inside job. So I'm going to take you into a gentle spiritual practice after all that. and then we'll do a little prayer. Because a little praying helps everything and moves us into peace. So I might have whipped you up a little bit with some of the stuff I talked about. Maybe you're actually having a reaction to something I've said. Maybe there's a new piece of information. Maybe you don't like my slant. That's all okay. Our job together is to find peace in that situation. And for you to find peace in every situation in your life where you feel that way about somebody else. Because we can't have peace if we don't have peace locally. We can't have peace if we don't accept diversity. We can't have peace if we don't consider the bigger picture but act locally. So I invite you to just be comfortable in your chair and close your eyes if that feels comfortable to you, and put your hand on your heart. Just take your right hand, press it over, put it on your heart. And taking a breath in, letting that slow exhale happen. And letting your heart come to a place of stillness. Our heart and our mind are intrinsically connected, and they are a wonderful moral compass for us. So let our mind bring our heart to stillness. Let our heart settle our mind. And go ahead and invite something really local, something maybe even personal, into your heart that maybe needs a little softening. Needs you to go out the side door and take a look from out there in with some fresh eyes. What is it about this situation that it is the place of less peace in your life? And as you inhale the love that's needed to soften that experience. And as you exhale, allow those edges to soften ever so slightly. Allow them to yield. Allow the ears of our heart to be open, to listen, to hear another opinion, another idea. And so I invite you to carry that gentle concept into your week. And notice when it comes up, and breathe in that love and allow it to soften the hard edges of whatever that situation is, so that you can have greater peace inside. And let's anchor this in prayer. We know that there is only one thing ever going on. It is going on for me, it is going on for you, it is going on for every person in this world. And that is love. I know that love is at the root of even fear. I know that love is the greatest divine quality that will soften all the hard edges of all of the people, of all of the countries, of all of the planet. And so I easily unite with this idea. It's an easy idea for me to hop on board with. I fully breathe love into every conversation I have. I stop and soften my gaze when I feel that I am different. I stop and soften my gaze and breathe into my heart to soften those edges when the person is in front of me that I know I need peace with. I allow situations to move about in peace. And I recognize where peace is needed in my life. I keep my eyes and my ears and my heart open to concepts that rub me the wrong way, to things I want to judge, to differences. And I breathe love into each and every one of those. And I become a role model for those around me to allow differences to exist. And I am still in peace. So I find myself in a space of gratitude, so grateful for all of the things that show up, that give me an opportunity to practice peace, and recognizing and grateful for those things that appear in opposition, for that is how I can know what peace looks like. I am grateful that peace can move through everything. I'm grateful for this teaching. I'm grateful for this community. I am grateful for the forever home that is waiting to welcome us. I feel peace standing on the floor in that space. And I am there now. So I simply release these words into that divine, immutable law that only knows to say, yes, 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 yes. Of course, my child, peace is possible. And so it is.